Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 Project, where me and Dallas worked our way through the A24 filmography and are counting down until the films return soon with On the Rocks next month. We continue to bring you interviews with talent involved in front of and behind the camera, with our latest interview with Boys State's Steven Garza. Boys State is a documentary film that follows 1,000 teenage boys attending Boys State in Texas, coming together to build a representative government from the ground up, from all different political backgrounds, navigating the challenges of organising political parties, consensus and campaigning for the highest office at Boys State, Governor. One of those Governor's candidates is Steven, who joins us for our latest A24 Project interview. Steven shares how he became involved with the documentary, what didn't make the cut, the daily process of attending Boys State and filming, his hopes for the future during a contentious election year in America, and much, much more. And thanks very much to Steven for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with the man himself. I don't know about you, but if you've watched Boys State, you've no doubt been incredibly inspired by this guy. So, you know, there's hope for the future. But thanks very much to Steven for joining me, and I hope you too enjoy the interview.
We have the opportunity to do something great. Are we going to make headlines for the wrong reasons? Are we going to dishonor the Legionnaires who consider us to be the best that Texas has to offer? Or will we show the world what patriots are made of? That when things get tough, we pull ourselves by our bootstraps like true Texans and get after it. Leave Texas greater than it was when we found it. That's right. We aren't secessionists, damn it. We are nationalists. One nation, under God, lovers of the Constitution of the United States of America. Let's do something great for Texas and amazing for the country. God bless every single one of you.
The concept of a boys' state is something new to audiences here in the UK. Was it always your goal to attend one? Because obviously it's got such a huge prestige in terms of, you know, you have your Bill Clintons, you've had many successful politicians have gone through there. Was it always your goal to take part in one?
Yeah, so my two best friends had gone in the years previous. One of them went 2 years before I did, and the other one went the year before I did. And so knowing that they were, you know, I wasn't super into politics and government, they're like, you have to go. And so I'm actually a very average student. I'm not anything particularly special, you know. I'm like in the bottom, you know, I was like in the middle of my class when I graduated high school. And to go to Boys State, the process is a bit rigorous, that grades really do matter. And so the way it worked is that over here we have this thing called the JROTC. It's like in colleges and universities around the country, there's these things called ROTC, which are basically training future military officers throughout all of college. And in high school, there's an equivalent to that with no military obligation whatsoever. And so I asked my instructor there if he could recommend me to my counselor. And then the counselor then nominates me to a board to interview with of American Legionnaires who sponsor the program. And they grilled me on my grades basically the entire time. But I was able to convince them, like, hey, you know, my passion isn't math or science. It's government and politics. And here's what I've been able to do in my free time. And here's what I think about it. And they're like, okay, you convinced us. The rest is history.
How did you get involved with this documentary, and how did sort of the directors, Jesse Moss and Andy McBain, sort of describe their goal for the film to you?
So I met Jesse and Torsten, who's the director of photography for the film, at my orientation for Boys State about a month before. You know, we all, about 70 of us from my local American Legion, you know, post came in for about a 2-hour orientation on what to expect, what to bring, et cetera, et cetera. Before they began, though, they said they had two guests, filmmaker Jesse Moss and Torsten Tilo, cinematographer, who want to just kind of tell us about the little project they're working on. And they introduced themselves and said that they were making a documentary film. Nobody really know, again, you know, it's, you know, I didn't know who Jesse was. I didn't know who Torsten was. Nobody, you know, really did. And they explained they were looking for a few subjects to follow throughout the week. And if any of us were just kind of interested in having a conversation to hang back after the orientation was over. So about 12 of us stood back. Everybody else left. There's 70 of us down to 12. We all sat at this table and kind of just talked about what we were hoping to do at Boise State and what we were looking forward to, while Jesse and Torsten filmed everything. And funny enough, we had actually talked about a third party at Boise State if we wanted to break off from the two-party system and form a third party, which is not allowed, not because they're against it, but because it's the way the program is set up. There's no way for there to be a third party in the program because they have certain spaces reserved. Like if they wanted to break off and do their own thing, it would be very, very difficult to do so. A lot of the kids are being very loud, and I'm very not. I'm very quiet and reserved, and for whatever reason, that caught Jesse's attention. I was not the flashiest or the loudest spoken or maybe even the most well-spoken of the bunch there. Some people were quoting Hegel and giving these fiery rants about government and stuff like that, and I'm there like, yeah, that's cool. And getting up to leave, and Jesse stopped me like, hey, can I talk to you for a little bit? And I'm like, oh, sure. We kind of have a little interview in the back for a few minutes, and he's like, can I take you out to like and get to know you a little bit? And I'm like, I love free food, so yeah. And so we do that. He gets to know me a little bit more. We do another interview where I'm sitting on the steps where you see in the film, wearing a black shirt. That was what that interview was. And at the end of the whole thing, maybe like 3 hours later, he was like, would you like to be one of the subjects in this film? And I said, of course, So this is about a month before Boise State happened. And, from there, kept in contact with the directors and, hey, we're sending out a cameraman to come, follow you from your home to the bus. And you're going to have a camera crew on you the entire week from like 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Did you have sort of any worries or concerns about getting involved in a film like this? Or was the sort of the politician, the passionate inside you thinking this could be a really exciting platform, with the interviews, the filming to showcase myself, spread a positive message and maybe inspire others?
I had no idea what it was going to be. I had no idea who Jesse and Amanda and all these people were. I thought it was kind of a little side project or something. I looked Jesse up after and I saw that he had a few, acclaimed film under his belt. And I'm like, whoa. But again, like none of us knew. And even again, after the filming was done, it was a year and a half until it premiered at Sundance. So none of us knew what was going to happen with it. None of us maybe just thought it was just a side, like a passion project, side project, maybe a project for the Legion itself. And it wouldn't really matter. But almost immediately, I think that me and Jesse and Torsten, and then later Amanda, when we met her, formed like this kind of instant connection of trust, which is very integral to, I guess, a documentary, making sure that I know that I'm giving them a week of my life, and then throughout that week I would be very vulnerable, emotionally, mentally, and to trust them with my story and make sure that they wouldn't spin it in a certain way or make me come off as something that I wasn't. That's like a real concern. You're wondering, like, for months, like, I wonder what it looks like, because I know what I did through my eyes, but from the perspective of the filmmakers, what is it like? But immediately form a bond with them, and that has strengthened very, like their family, now. And so it was just a very instant thing, so I feel I can trust you, and they could trust me, and that, I think that's very important to a documentary filmmaking, is the relationship between the filmmaker and the subject, making sure that there's trust there. Because if there's no trust, then I'm going to be reserved. I'm not going to trust them to, view me at my most vulnerable.
What was it like, sort of an average day, being sort of, you're attending Boise State, but you're also working on a documentary at the same time? What would sort of be an average kind of day for you, sort of going to Boise State, but at the same time filming a documentary?
Yeah, so I would wake up around 6-ish, shower and everything like that. We have to be in our 2 lines by 6:45 to go eat breakfast, and then got out to the line. There would be the cameraman and the boomstick guy waiting to mic me up, and so they put a mic on me, and then off we go. So we do our own little thing. They just kind of, and I also formed a relationship with the Daniel Carter and Drake Roy were the two that were with me most of the week. And so I don't know if you can tell, but it is very hot in Austin
Hmm.
in June, and we're forced to wear jeans and have our shirts go up, walking an average of about 10 miles a day, up and down Austin outside campaigning. And these guys are doing the thing I'm doing, but carrying a heavy camera and a boomstick and trying to capture, um, everything that's going on around them. So my experience is very much the similar. The only difference I think is that, well, I had a camera on me, and none of us at Boise State knew the cameras really didn't have an effect on too many things, I believe, because to most people the cameras are part of the experience because they don't know what Boise State is. So the fact that there's all these camera people, not just filming me, but filming the audiences, filming speeches, filming B-roll, was just kind of like, oh, this is the way it goes. There wasn't really much of a difference. The only time that my, I guess, experience differed from most statesmen is when I would slip out every now and then to go sit down and do a sit down interview with the filmmakers, and I love those for the sole purpose that it gave me a chance to sit down and breathe and decompress and kind of explain to somebody my thought process or what I felt, after kind of it's just like campaigning. I love meeting people. I think despite me being kind of shy, I'm a very social person, but I also need to recharge and step away from it all. That's why I tend to be by myself most of the time. You see me, everybody's in their groups, and I'm just kind of off to like trying to recharge myself and get ready to go at it again.
What surprised me as an outsider, maybe this says a lot about me as maybe an optimist, was how quickly, obviously, the dirty politics took place, even at sort of a level like Boys State, looking at sort of people's social media, trying to create controversy where really none should be. What was it like to sort of go through something like that? Was that something that you can anticipate it's going to be part of your Boys State experience and prepare for, or does that surprise you when you're kind of in the thick of it?
Oh, it was 100% unexpected, and threw a wrench in all my plans for the week. I, being the progressive person in the sea of mostly red, or what was on the surface of sea of mostly red, I had to be very careful. I was walking a tightrope the entire week, making sure that, like Renee says, you got to be in specific. You got to be kind of very broad strokes and pick an issue that's not going to, teeter one person one way or the other. So my issue was uh, dealing or campaigning against secession, which was, the statesman had did it the year before us, and I have very strong feelings about it. Even though we're in a government simulation, the idea of, in the American Civil War that 11 states broke away to uphold the institution of slavery, and to follow in that footsteps to secede, it just very, I was, me speaking about that was very much real. It was coming from a place of knowing that the harm that this country has done to many people, and the fact that people, the people saying the same things, jokingly or not,
Yeah.
was very disrespectful to me. Just like if anybody wanted to joke about a serious issue, it would have been the same. So with that, most people can agree on, being Americans and being Texans at the same time. And so my plan the entire week was to kind of write on that idea of bipartisanship and unity without really going into the issues, because I didn't ever want to compromise. I knew if I went up there and, gave a Bernie Sanders speech or, a Beto O'Rourke speech and gave them all the views that I had, progressive views, I wouldn't have made it anywhere, and that would have been the end of that story. you know. So I knew that I had to be true to myself, but at the same time, how do you, in the political minority, win a majority of voters?
Yeah.
And so that was my struggle, and so that was my plan. And then it came out, one of my progressive issues came out, that I was an organizer for a gun reform movement. And so from there, it's a very interesting feeling, because as I remember it, when I walked up to the stage, I was being heckled, like, and booed, and like you see in the film, people are immediately hostile to me. And it felt like the entire room was against me. And that's a very jarring thing you don't expect. I've never ever seen a politician walk into a room that is so vehemently against them and is cheering and booing? Like, maybe there's a heckler, here or there, but most politicians give a speech in front of supporters. Here I am giving a speech to what seems to be an opposition. And I got emotional speaking about it, about my experiences and the experiences of my generation when it comes to dealing with school shooting drills are the norm. I remember this one time, me and my friend were walking towards each other in the hallway, smiling at each other. We were in our uniforms, with a very nice uniform for our ROTC. We were, like complimenting each other. And then during the passing period where people were trying to go to class, and this is maybe but maybe 2 weeks after the Parkland High School shooting in Florida. And as we're in the passing period, everybody's going to class, the fire alarm goes off, which has never ever happened in my 12 years of schooling. The fire alarm never ever goes off when we're going to class. And it's always planned, like the teachers always tell us, hey, we have a fire drill like in that second period. So everybody, and it was the weirdest thing, and everybody stopped where they were and just looked at each other without saying a word. What's happening? Immediately you think of the worst case scenario, made more so by the fact that the teachers were telling us to get out of the building because this wasn't a planned drill. What had happened was there was a faulty wire and it set off the alarm. But 2 weeks after Parkland, and this, the feeling you had, that kind of the pit in your stomach of what's going on, especially me having a little brother who also goes to my school. He's 2 grades younger than I am. That it came from somewhere. And I think they saw that I genuinely, if they didn't believe in my views, they believed in my sense of wanting to work together on this issue with the other side rather than keep them locked out and work with the people who agree with me. So by the end of it, most of them were cheering me. I did beat Robert in the runoff by like 70% of the vote. It wasn't close. And it was, like, okay. And then now it's, the real test is against the other party who hasn't really gotten the chance to know me, and just see what they see through social media and their campaign people.
I spoke with Jesse and Amanda a few weeks ago, and they talked about sort of the extensive footage that was obviously shot. Was there a moment that sadly just didn't make the final cut that you maybe went through or experienced that you just wished was in that final film that you wished audience members could see?
Yeah, so the way the elections are done is that they're done so the second night, which is a Monday, is when you're still trying to gather signatures. And so Tuesday is the first election. There's usually always going to be a runoff for the governor position because there's so many candidates running. The fact that anybody could, in a 14-way race, I got a third of the vote, which was, with 14 people running is pretty huge. Yeah. And so usually Tuesday night, you find out the results of who's going to the runoffs. And then Wednesday night is the nominee, whoever gets picked to be their party's nominee. And then Thursday is when the actual general election happens. So just for the sake of not having too many election results happening, they cut out the first one when I made it to the runoff, because they do announce that, like, and for the governor's race, for the national list, we have a runoff between Robert McDougall and Steven Garza, and cheers, and freaking out that I made it. It was, that to be able to do that, to be able to know that I got on it, was, I think, as nerve-wracking as anything else that week, maybe besides the governor results. But I was shaking. I was so nervous. I wanted to throw up, not knowing, hearing those results, and then my city cheering me. That was cut just because they didn't want to do, Steven wins, goes into the runoff, and then he wins the runoff, and then there's a general. It's just for the sake of pacing. They didn't want to have like 3 election nights in the film. They just picked the 2, the runoff, or the nomination, and the general. There's also, this is not related to me, but it is a big part of my experience. There was a guy there who was running, and I always tell this story. There's a guy who was running there who was advocating for the legalization of LSD, the recreational legalization of LSD, and he became very popular. If he ran for governor, he probably would have won. But he was just like he looked like your stereotypical long hair, big
Yeah.
glasses, like doing this, sign, and everybody
Yeah.
was doing it. He would mesmerize the crowd. If the crowd is divided up into three sections, he would point at the left and they would go L, and then he point at the center and they would say S and then D, and they would all chant that. He ran for the Supreme Court and won.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so but he's not, I know he was like in the cut before the final cut,
Yeah.
but just he didn't kind of, it's like decisions, like, I mean, I guess he was a pretty easy decision to cut out because, there's enough, funny stuff. I think that's what's special about the entire thing, is that it can make you laugh, it can make you, nervous, it can make you cry, there's something, it can make you mad, it can make you happy, hopeful, pessimistic, there's so many emotions that could come from this 109-minute film. And to know that there is over 300 hours of footage caught, condensed down to that small amount of time, just the craziness of the week, it could have been like a 10-part miniseries.
That was incredible. Like, what was your reaction to sort of the finished product? Obviously, it got showcased at Sundance, and then it gets bought for this record fee by Apple and A24. What was that whole experience like of seeing the finished product, and then a film that you're, one of the leads in, is you now kind of wake up and thinking, well, I wonder what they're going to do with this. And then you realize it's going to be showcased all around the world, from United States to Azerbaijan and Iceland and everywhere in between.
Right, yeah.
What was that whole experience like?
It's very surreal, again, because we didn't know what would become of it, because there's no guarantee that anything will happen with it. We could have walked out of, people could have not liked it. People could have, walked out of, we could have walked out without a deal from a distributor. It could have been months, before anybody wanted to pick it up, and it could have just gotten picked up by a smaller, entity, and kind of that's that. I was very nervous about the entire thing. So I went back to Boise State I'm a counselor for the program now. So I go back every single year to, be those people in those blue shirts, and, getting to be that, adult in the room. And man, I think I love that more than actually being in it, because as a political science student, as a government, like, to be able to see that simulation in front of you is something, you have a front row seat to it. You're there watching them, and you're in your mind thinking what's going to happen. You're there. It's kind of like the audience is along for the ride in the film. I'm there watching them do something completely different than what happened my year, which is very interesting, and being able to mentor these kids is great. But again, a year and a half to premiere it. We were all a year and a half older, and a lot of it was kind of in the back of our mind. We're trying to finish high school. We're trying to go to, we're all in college now. We're all doing our own thing. Robert goes off to the military academy at West Point. Ben goes off to North Carolina. Renee goes to Austin, and I went to El Paso for school. And, are we going to get into the Sundance Film Festival? It was, and then you're going, like your mom is coming. We're going to fly you guys out and do all that. And I had never ever been in snow before, at least not in 15 years. And to get there and seeing all the snow, and it was just a wonderful weekend. And going to this theater when we used to go to movie theaters, and not knowing what was going to come in the next few months of this pandemic, to be there in a room with 500 other people, of those 500, maybe 20 have seen this film. And going through the emotions of it, hearing the audience laugh and roar and cheer and clap, and when, at the end of the film, when it fades to black after that one scene, I'm not sure if there's spoilers or not, but after that one scene, just hearing sniffles, and people giving a standing ovation to the film, and especially getting to experience that with my mom, who was next to me, and she didn't know what I was doing. Like, she didn't know that, like, this was going to be as big as it was, and we're at Sundance. She wasn't really aware, and then she saw it, and she cried, and I cried. And when we did the post Q&A, it came to me, and all I could get up was "Hi, Mom," and then the entire audience stood up and gave her a standing ovation as she's crying, and it was just a wonderful, it feels like forever ago that's when that happened. And I try to think about it often, just because it cheers me up, and knowing that what life was like before all this ended up happening. We were only all there for the weekend, so about 3 screenings at Sundance, and Jesse and Amanda and everybody else would stay there the entire week up until the awards and everything. I was flying home Monday morning, flying back to my dorm in El Paso, and there's a stop in Denver. I get off the plane and I check my phone, and I get a message from somebody, some person who saw the film, and they're like, "Congrats, Apple." And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, hold on. And so I search up Voice Date on Google, and I see the Hollywood Reporter reporting that the film was sold to Apple and A24. And I was just blown. I was, sitting there waiting for and there's like nobody around me know what just happened to me. Nobody know, like of these strangers. I'm over here in my seat, like shaking, and just like losing my mind, calling my parents, calling everybody and saying, look, they bought the film. They're going to show it and all this stuff. And God, it was just, I just so much adrenaline, and especially when they won the grand jury prize. I wish I was there, not just to cheer, because Jesse and Amanda are the most wonderful people ever. And, for them to kind of take the risk that they did of picking 3 of us beforehand, and all of us ended up having an integral part of the story, and especially because it was Amanda's first time, co-directing with Jesse. I was sitting in my dorm eating taco, like Jack in the Box tacos in my dorm, like by myself. And I was scrolling through Twitter, and, kind of like seeing the Sundance Award stuff, like the feed, and I refresh, and I see Boy State wins grand jury prize. And I, again, freaked out, and I'm like pacing around my dorm, I lived alone, calling everybody, like, we won. And, it was, man, I just thinking about it, it makes me, it was amazing. It was just such an amazing week. And, wish we could have all been there longer to enjoy it and take it in. But it was being, getting stopped on the street, being, asked for pictures and all these kind of things. And, I remember me and my mom were eating at this restaurant, and there was a table next to us. We were eating breakfast, and there was a table next to us. And I asked my mom if we could like pass the ketchup. They didn't have any. So, oh yeah, sure. And I grabbed the ketchup and I handed it to them, and the lady goes, she can't get it out. Like, and I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. And she's like, oh my God. And we take a picture, and her friends are like, also freaking out. It's just, it's very insane. It was such an amazing experience. And again, completely like surreal, it didn't feel real that this was going to happen. And then it's out, it's out in the world. People are watching it, celebrities are talking about it. And, I'm just here in my home in Houston, and doing virtual college right now. So
it's amazing, and especially when you think of like A24 films as well, that you've joined sort of that lineage of they're known for those coming of age films, whether it's something like Lady Bird, Eighth Grade, now something like this. It just fits in so perfectly well with it. And obviously you play a major role in sort of their marketing campaign. You touched on it, how have things sort of changed for you since then? I mean, it's been a few weeks, but it seems to be something that, you were talking about there. People are engaging with it, talking about it. There's discourse, there's New York Times op-eds. It seems this little film has just continued to kind of blossom and explode, sort of. How's it been for you personally?
It's been very, again, the word is just, it doesn't feel real. Like it feels like I'm going to wake up at any moment, and, life, just my phone is constantly blowing up, and like I people like, did you see this thing? And I'm like, I haven't seen it, I haven't checked my phone. And it's almost all consuming in a very good way. Being able to because I don't really have any intention to go into film or acting. I don't think I can act. So this is like my one time to like experience what it would be like to be in a film, right? The press junkets and the attention, and the trailers and the ads. And it's funny enough, just yesterday we have a group chat for my class in government, about 200 people, and I give them like a fun fact about this one race happening today in Massachusetts, and they're like, oh, that's very interesting. Wait a minute, you're Steven Garza. And I'm like, I'm like, you're from the Boy State doc. And I'm like, hi, nice. Yeah, I am. And everybody was kind of like, oh my God, it's it's like just the opportunities and the the fact that I get to meet people like you around the world and have these discussions and seeing like the fact that at the surface a political film about teenagers doesn't sound like I'm not even sure I would watch that. But the reviews and the audience reception very very positive. It's an election year. It's a very tumultuous election year here in the United States. Um, I know that the UK has been, I follow UK politics somewhat closely. I very really do and like the way they do politics sometimes. I like the whole multi-party thing. I like the parliamentarian system, the fact that little smaller parties can still have a big say because they're voting as a block. And so knowing that like people can kind of relate to that, there's like conservatives and labor and the Greens and all that, and Republicans and Democrats here getting messages from Australia, Italy, Japan, Brazil, Mexico, Germany. It's just very thankful is I guess thankful for the opportunities, because with all that comes I'm able to my school situation is taken care of because of my involvement in this film. I got to meet a whole bunch of people. Apple has been and A24 have been super supportive, really pushing to make sure that the world gets to see it. And in a time where I guess new films in 2020 are few and far in between, the fact that they give us a chance to kind of like introduce people to not only documentaries but something that they maybe wouldn't have picked up in a standard film year where there was there's no not so many big Hollywood blockbusters. But hey, there's this film that we were fortunate enough to premiere at Sundance in January, and a lot of films and filmmakers didn't get to experience premiering and being shown to the world until probably next year. So just very very thankful that things have worked out the way they have despite of everything going on in the world. The fact that Apple was still like, we're going to get this out, pandemic or not, this is going to go out in the world this year.
Yeah, we even got it in Sundance, London here this year.
Yeah.
That it was shut down, but they still had Boys State as one of their virtual premieres, which was fantastic. I mean, obviously you've touched on it there. America, I say I suppose America is approaching a significant election. What do you think sort of politicians, young, even the kind of older campaigners, what do you think they can sort of take from what kind of Boys State showed about sort of, as you said, your message of sort of coming together, that bipartisan message, and being true to yourself? What do you kind of hope politicians, and probably actually viewers take from your story and the documentary?
Democracy is a very interesting concept, and if I would hope eventually that the higher ups and many politicians have seen the film, and hoping that one day, Donald Trump and Joe Biden will sit down and watch it and see the effects that they have on the youth in terms of, and Ben touches upon this in that whole play to win narrative and that whole win at all costs is not healthy to our democracy. It erodes it. It makes it less stable. And it will only take so much before the sinews of our republic come undone because of it. Mm-hmm. If Donald Trump and Joe Biden and any politician in the country wants to, maybe they don't care about the effects now because if that happens in a few decades, they won't be here, but their kids will, and their grandkids and their grandkids. And it's like, this is like, you got to be very careful of what you leave to your descendants, because it's my generation, and in 20 years, if in 20, 30, 40 years after they're gone, it's going to be my generation that has to pick up the deal with the fallout of what happens in 2020, which could be very monumental depending on what happens. If the president decides that he doesn't want to give up his if he calls it a rigged election, if he loses and he refuses to accept the result, I can't begin to imagine what would happen if that were the case. If a sitting president refuses to give up power. Likewise, I can't imagine what it would be like if Donald Trump gets 4 more years in office. It's very timely, and it kind of goes to show that the kids are watching, the young people watch the way the adults do it, and they think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's corrosive, and it erodes, and it's not a good thing for the United States, or for anywhere for that matter. I think that people, despite their political differences, should fight where they need to fight. There are some ideological differences between parties that are never, ever, ever going to be resolved through compromise. Like for me, pro-choice is not a negotiable thing. The woman's right to choose for me is not a negotiable thing. We're not going to agree on that, at least with conservative people who are pro-life. However, there are some things that just because we can't agree on that doesn't mean that we shouldn't just come to the table and find out what we could agree upon. Gun control in the US is a very controversial issue. And there's many things about gun reform that Republicans and Democrats aren't going to come to an agreement on. But there is one thing that I know off the top of my head that they can, which is universal background checks, which is 90% of the country supports. And Congress, which should reflect their constituents in America, should get that one thing done. Even though they if they can't agree on anything else besides that, at least they can come to the table. But they won't come to the table to tackle an issue that the American people overwhelmingly support, because they don't want to talk to each other. And then nothing gets done, and then more people, as a result, suffer the consequences of that. So I think the shelf life of this film is really going to be hopefully in classrooms across the country for many years to come, of having young people involved in politics and seeing like the effects that they could have, and imagining that at Boy State there's no stakes there's no consequences, it's a simulation. Mm-hmm. But what if it wasn't? What if this is what happens in 20, the same people who were at Boy, I can imagine that there's going to be at least a couple of people who went to 2018 Texas Boy State who are going to pursue careers in politics, in business, who are going to have an effect on the direction of our state and our country. They should, the idea that our generation can't come to the table is very, people have that idea that my generation is very liberal. And I think this film proved that it's, don't bet the farm on that. Don't, pin all your hopes on the young people, because they're watching and they're seeing, and they get, their thought, the way they do things and the way they think and what they believe in come from a lot of adults, from their parents, from media, from politicians. They're, I'm gonna say easily influenced, but they don't know a lot of them don't know what they believe in, and they're still trying to find that. And if they see that if playing dirty wins and that's the way the game goes, and what do you think they're gonna do in 20 years? Yeah. So it's a very, very, very long answer, but in the end, I hope that people can see that if we want to, Ben Franklin said, when asked, like, after, the foundation of our country and the Constitution, asked us, well, what do we have, a republic or a monarchy? And he responds, a republic for as long as you can keep it. And to show that if we want this country to blossom and to continue throughout the ages, we got to stop the current trend of political. We got to stop the way politics is done in this country. Mm-hmm. And instead of doing things in a negative way and focusing on that one win at all costs and damaging the health of our country is not a way to go about it.
And finally, Stephen, what's next for yourself? Obviously, you've touched on you've gone to college. What's your kind of plans and expectations for the future? I think there's a lot of people that watch that movie and we're all ready to tick the box with your name next to it.
Yeah, so I'm studying government at UT Austin. Actually, me and Renee attend the same school, and I'm here virtually. He's over there in person. So I hope to work on political campaigns. I hope to hold a position in government, not necessarily as an elected official, but as a staffer and as an advisor. And that for me is kind of a dream scenario. However, if the opportunity ever comes up to step up to the plate of running for office, I wouldn't be against it. It's very interesting. A slice of my life is there for the world to see. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing all these events and my face is out there, and yet I still kind of you know, it might have a degree of privacy that even politicians don't have. And so I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that I can speak my mind and not be afraid of political repercussions, so I'm not sure, maybe one day, but definitely I can't wait, in maybe 10 years or something, if I ever run for office, somebody takes something I said in this film and uses it against me.
I'm going to maybe find a bookmaker that's going to I'm going to put the odds on you being the politician that finally turns Texas from red to blue in a Senate race. I'm going to get that on.
And I'll make a bold prediction. That'll happen in this decade. Texas will flip to blue, and by the end of this decade, and I hope to play a part in that. So.
Well, thank you so much, Steven. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, and thanks for giving up your time. I loved the documentary. I'm a politics nerd myself. I love following sort of American politics, and I thought you were an absolute star in the documentary. So thank you so much for chatting with us, and good luck with your studies, elections, and everything to come. I'm rooting for you guys.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I love having this conversation, especially with you being on. In Europe and all that. It's just it's surreal, and I love talking about it to people whose systems don't exactly reflect what the U.S. system is. So thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Well, take care and good luck out there with everything at the moment, and hopefully it's not the last we hear of you.
Thank you so much.